Don't take this word architecture as a academic word, or what does it mean an architecture. So that's why we use the adjective of high level, because it's really kind of conceptual architecture that would like to represent which are the essential components that you would need to deploy in order to get on board in a data space and start to share data in a data space. So don't be quite demanding in terms of what the architecture word means, but you will see in a while what I'm referring to. So I have created this kind of, let's say, points that I would like to tackle during the training session. So I would explain you a little bit which has been our restrictions and our challenges at the time to come up with this architecture. Also the process that we have followed to build this conceptual architecture. I will give you some details about the components and how we think in the approach of the overall data space for smart communities. And we will bring some examples and some practical information about recommended steps or the use of connectors or what is next. And we will conclude the session just for giving to you the floor for expressing your concerns, your doubts, your difficulties, so we can prepare specific points for the next training session where we will go deeper into this, into all these aspects. Okay. So I would start by telling you the challenges that we were facing at the beginning of this process. So first of all, the main challenge is that we don't start from scratch. So we are aware of the existing legacy systems in the cities and in the communities, and then we need to tackle with this existing architecture. So it's not like start from a blank page and then we need to gather all these legacy systems. Then we also have a look at the existing references architecture for data spaces. So we are not going to reinvent the wheel. We are just trying to adhere to existing proposals of reference architectures from IDSA, from Gaia-X, from other existing players in the field. Then, of course, especially because we are in the public sector, we need to be compliant with all the existing and upcoming European regulation. So this means that we need to somehow follow the interoperability framework or the digital wallet proposed by the European Commission in short. So, I mean, we need to be compliant with the European regulation more than other domains. Then it's also a challenge for us to cohabit with the open data approach. Why? Because the trend is to think that all the data generated or collected by the cities or by the governments must be public as open data. And this sounds like preventing the usage of data spaces. But this is not the case. First, because not all the data that is being shared is necessarily open. And second, because not all the open data that exists is suitable for being shared or for being interoperable with other data. And also because there may exist different scenarios where it's really the private data or the non-open data the one that has to be shared in the context of a city or of a community. Of course, as Timo has said before, our aim is to be aligned with the minimal interoperable mechanisms, which originally were born in this context of the cities and communities, but of course that can be extended to any other domain. And finally, the most difficult challenge is or was trying to come up with something generic enough for being reusable by different types of cities, communities, pilots, data spaces, and so on, but specific enough at the same time for being something useful. So this has been the most difficult part. So looking at these challenges, the context of the work that we have done is basically to analyze all these existing scenarios, frameworks, references that I was referring before, and trying to create a kind of use case agnostic high-level architecture, which means that you can basically, it's at the level of specificity that is applicable to different use cases, but that assumes that it's evolving from the current situation, from the existing legacy systems in cities and communities that aim at becoming a data space or get on board into a data space. For that, we have identified which are the fundamental components that are required to be deployed in every data space, but also in this European data space. We will comment later on about this federation approach. And then, in order to exemplify how this architecture could work in the real scenarios, we also customize this architecture into some specific examples for illustration. Finally, we also provided some recommended steps and guidelines for applying this architecture and these components. So this is to frame a little bit the work that you will see right now and that we have been doing so far. For that, we applied certain methodologies. So we first starting by analyzing the existing architectures. We identified the different scenarios that I will mention right now. We selected several use cases representative for these scenarios. And we, after defining this high-level architecture, we customized this into these use cases. And we got the feedback or the validation from these use cases. So we hope also that now through the pilots of the project, we can continue validating this approach and make it even more concrete and useful for the tangible deployment of the data. Regarding the different, let's say, resources that we were looking at, here I have just listed the most relevant ones. That are included in one of the reports that you have in the onboarding package. So if you have the curiosity to see the analysis that we did, you can go there and you can easily look at it. So existing scenarios. So basically what we observed from the different interviews and surveys that we were doing for I think more than 80 cities across Europe, we found 3 different types of, let's say, legacy systems in the cities. The scenario that we call Greenfield are those cities that are really, well, starting a little bit the digitalization. They have maybe some verticals, some services isolated running in the city, but they don't have really what we usually call a data platform or some kind of aggregation or integration of data. And then we have the following advanced scenario is those cities that really does this kind of data platform, and they are doing a kind of aggregation and consolidation of all these all these vertical services into one aggregated platform. And well, here below you have just a schema about what we call usually a data platform of a city, which is basically formed by this data broker that is collecting the data from different data sources that are normally translating this into a common models or APIs in order to be interoperable. And then a system to publish this data or to expose this data for generating services on top of that. And additionally, of course, there is always typically an identity management system and authorization system with all the access policies. So this is the scenario that we usually call brownfield, which means that exists something that represents the city platform. And finally, something similar but a little bit more advanced is the case of those cities where a digital twin is in place. And here we have a more sophisticated or advanced representation of the city through this digital twin, and normally they are able even to do some predictions or some simulations about what is happening in the city. So as you can see here in this picture, in the case of this project, these two last scenarios are those ones that are our target. So we are assuming that the cities are already having in place a kind of data platform or a kind of digital twin in order to upgrade to the data space level. So as I referred before, if we want to evolve from the typical data platforms from the cities, what we have observed is that we need to somehow integrate or upgrade the existing identity and authorization management systems with a more decentralized approach, because when these cities become a data space, they need to interact with other participants in the data space, and then it's needed to come up with a kind of registry of credentials for all the participants in the data space. And then the identity management systems of the data platforms needs to somehow integrate this with this registry. And on the other hand, deployed a kind of authorization policies stored into their identity management system. Once this identity part has been solved, identity and authorization part has been solved, if they want to really start to share data with other participants in the data space, they should also put in place a kind of catalog or a kind of common vocabulary in order to describe the data, to publish the data, and then to, let's say, consume the data following the same format or the same interoperable layer. Of course, one data space can be federated to other data space, which is the case of this European data space for smart communities. But this is like the next step. So we need to think in this project in two levels. One is how this is deployed per data space, and how every data space is federated into the European data space. So there are a kind of two levels of deployment, what we are going to tackle in this project. So if we try to map all these components, either from the data platform and the ones proposed for, let's say, onboard into a data space, we can see in the DSCC, in the Data Spaces Support Center taxonomy, where they are mapped. So we can easily identify that the data API corresponds to the data models and data chains. The data publication can be part of the catalog in the publication and discovery building block, but also you need to trace where the data is coming from. So provenance and traceability is also affecting to this component. The identity management, of course, has to do with the access policies and with the identity management building blocks. And the new components, the authorization policies and the universal trust registry, are referring both to the sovereignty and trust pillar, but also again the tracing of the data impact in these two components as well. So this is just simply to demonstrate that the existing components are not very far from what the current building blocks are proposing, and that can be somehow complemented with these new components that are required in order to upgrade towards the data space. So how does it work, this new, let's say, process to get on board into the data space, to start to share data with other participants in the data space. So I have listed here in the right all the, let's say, sequence of actions that are required or that will be happening in the usage of these components. So we are assuming here as a step 0 that all the participants in the data space are already registered in this Universal Trust Data Registry. Well, in other places, it's called in a little bit different way, but in the end, it's a registry of credentials. So once all the participants are already there, if a participant wants to start a data request, what he has to do is to send to use the verifiable credentials from this registry and send it to the, let's say, entry point of the platform to receive the request, and then this proxy request to the authorization component of the platform the verification of the participant of the credentials. As this doesn't know how to verify these credentials, this has to inform to the identity management to grant access to the participant, and the identity management system of the platform has to do this request to the authorization policies, has to validate through the authorization policies store if this user is allowed to access to the data that he is requesting to access. Then this component checks with the Universal Registry that the credentials provided by the participant are okay, and if they are verifiable and valid, then this approval is returned, is doing the way back till the participant again, and then the request can start to be processed. So in some cases, what is going to happen is that the authorization policies store is embedded somehow into the identity management system, depending on the type of identity management that you are using. And then some of these steps can be condensed into one single step, because the authorization of the credentials according to the policies will be done in the same step. So then, according to this approach, which are these minimal required components, is then on one side this universal registry of credentials, where there exists one unique credential per user that includes the mechanisms to identify a trusted participant, and that is according to the current recommendations of the standardization bodies and also from the Data Spaces Support Center, is relying on the verifiable credentials and trusted users. The second component could be this authorization policies store, which is a kind of plugin or add-on that you can add to your identity management, and which mission is to verify the identity and the access rights of the participant. And finally, once you have already solved the identification and authorization part of the access to the data, you can actually start to share the data. And in this case, you can have different federation services for doing this actual exchange of data. And the one that we have considered as a minimal one to deploy into the data space is the catalog. And that's why here, regarding the catalog, it's so the minimal capabilities that we need to require to the catalog is to allow the providers to expose the descriptions and manage the access to these descriptions, both data and services. And for the customers, being able to search and to find the data or the services that they are looking for, and to get access to this data according to the authorization policies that they have. For the implementation, well, there are different ways of implementing this catalog. There could be a fully decentralized catalog working like let's say connecting different existing catalogs, or could be a centralized catalog that could be deployed in the, let's say, owner or holder or governed authority of the data space, and the rest of the participants are publishing their data descriptions. And can work also into different approach, either pulling the data, pulling the request, or pushing the requests from the customers. And what are there still open questions is at the level of each data space, but also at the level of the European data space, what exactly we would like to federate, which data it's really need to be part of this common catalog, or yes, this either decentralized or centralized catalog of the data and services at the level of the data space, but also at the level of the European data space. If we want to have this as a feature included in the connector, I will come back later on to the topic of the connectors, but I just wanted to mention here that the catalog itself, the cataloging feature, can be included as one of the capabilities of the connector. And finally, whether we would like to provide marketplace capabilities to this catalog or not. So if we want to include accounting and trading features to the catalog, becoming a marketplace, or just simply a kind of let's say repository of metadata descriptions. So this is with regards to the components. Once we already have what could be the architecture or the minimal components for creating or deploying a data space, what is going to what we are going to find at the real life. So at the real life, we will have this federated approach because we don't expect to have a big European data space where all the cities and communities, let's say, share the data all together in a common space. So the federation approach is much more realistic with the current landscape, but also with the interest and with the needs of the cities and communities. So here is just a possible example of two data spaces that will be federated through the European data space for smart communities. So these data spaces can be from your pilots, so from the pilots that are currently running. And in every data space, we may have different, even different participants with different data platforms that are sharing data between them. So then, even within each of the data spaces in the pilots, we may have a federation scenario, because we may have two data spaces in one of the pilots, let's say, federated. So in this picture, you may see that in the central part, in the European space for smart communities, our idea is to deploy this registry of credentials. So we can, let's say, register the credentials of all the participants of your data spaces. And we also expect to deploy this federated catalog where you can mostly register or describe your services, the services of your data spaces that can be reused or shared with other data spaces across Europe. But this schema, as I said, can be replicated in every of the pilot, and even within each of the data spaces. And here, just I have mapped the components that should be, let's say, connected from the data spaces to the federated data space. And I will come back later on a little bit when I talk about the steps. But well, this is more or less the approach that we have already commented to you since the beginning, I think. If we want to somehow facilitate or simplify the way that a participant is getting on board in a data space, we may use data space connectors. A data space connector is a suite of components which includes all these capabilities that I have been mentioned before, and why not many more, to facilitate the onboarding of participants into a data space. So after the analysis that we did from the different reference architectures and existing legacy systems, we think that the minimal requirements that should include a connector are the ones that I have listed here. So the connector should provide an authentication mechanism which is aligned with the European Blockchain Services Interface specifications, which refers to the decentralized identity, verifiable credentials, and the related standards that you can see here. And of course, it's recommended to be compatible with the eIDAS regulation on one side, but also with the upcoming European digital wallet in order to avoid any obsolescence in a short time. And then in relation to authorization, the recommendation is to implement an ABAC architecture and using the ODRL language for the definition of the policies, and open policy agent that is Rego implementing for the actual use of these policies. Then for once the authorization and authentication are already, let's say, solved, you need to start to exchange or to share data in the end, practically. And then it's recommended to define or to support some interoperable data exchange API as one of the has been mentioned before by Timo, depending on the type of data in the SILD or LDs. So, I mean, there are different APIs for different types of data, but you need to get an agreement in your data space which data exchange API are you going to use in order to be truly interoperable. Also, if you want to somehow define some contract management between for the data transactions, let's say monetization, we recommend also to use existing APIs and don't try to invent anything new. And standardized publication mechanisms, as we have talked this morning, the CAT is an option, but of course, if there is some missing or lacking ways of descriptions in this standard, we can consider also extensions or other types of standards. I just brought here one example, so I'm not just for your information and for you to see actually how a connector it's working or it's let's say being implemented. So I just put here the firewall data space connector. You can find other connectors in other literature. And I brought it here because it's already included in the Data Spaces Support Center toolbox. So, I mean, if you want more information about this connector, just let me know. But just consider it as one example for your information. Once I have already, this is the part that I more or less would like to explain you as content. So before going maybe into the examples, if you have any specific question, although we will have some interactive part later on, but I mean, some a straightforward question, I can solve it right now, if I can.
In the previous example, you had two data spaces, one on the left and one on the right. So in this case, for example, the top right and top no, sorry. So the top and the bottom, those are the pilots within a data space, right? Something like that.
Well, I mean, in your case, according to according to the current pilots we have different scenarios. So, for example, data space one could be the example of the pilot A, because in the pilot A we will have in the same data space two city data platforms. Okay, so we have here a data space formed by two city data platforms. But in the case of the pilot B, you are right that the data space 2 should be split into 3, and then pilot B could be three data platforms, one data platform per data space. So depends. This is just an example, but we may have different scenarios and different combinations of what we call data space. In some cases will be a city platform, maybe sharing data with platforms of providers or I don't know, any other type of sources of data. And in other cases, we may have in the same data space several city platforms or several city platforms.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so then I will show you a couple of examples that we were using or validating in the previous work. So I had the liberty to took two of the cities that are now part of the current pilots. So I will change it in the future for the new pilots. But here, for example, we made this example with Helsinki City about their application or system for heat and climate atlas. In this example, they were sharing data about mobility, transport, environment, weather, energy, and urban planning. And they identified that the required developments and integrations that they would need in order to, let's say, upgrade or to adopt these components could be first to migrate to a comparable identity management solution, because according to them, this was not somehow compatible with this kind of, let's say, approach. Then to integrate with the Universal Trust Registry and the Federation layer, the catalog, configure the authorization policy store, and implement a data translation component because they had to somehow normalize or translate their data into the let's say, agreed format or standard at the level of the data space. So here you can see in the original architecture provided by Helsinki, we included more or less which would be the components affected by this, let's say, upgrade or integration with the new components. Then the second example was with Amsterdam. In the case of Amsterdam, the data that they were considering was road closures and construction works information, floating car data, and feedback data from the users of the system. And then the identified steps were the integration with the registry and with the federated catalog, the configuration of the authorization policy store, again the same. And here also a kind of translation for being interoperable as they were using REST API and Apex2. So this will be depending on the final agreement that will be done in each of the data spaces. And again, here we also identify which could be the interaction of the existing architecture with the new components. Of course, this is very high level, so we should go into more granular, let's say, details for implementing this actually. But well, gives a flavor about the kind of work that would be required to do. So if we then trying to put all this in concrete steps, so I have split, as I said before, steps into levels. So on one side, steps that should be followed by each pilot data space for the deployment, and then the steps that we as the project level need to follow in order to set up the European data space. We are assuming in both cases that the agreement on the policies, on the contracts, on everything that is required to be agreed has been already set up in the governance layer in the previous step. And then these could be the steps where these policies and agreements are already in place. So for a pilot data space, you should have first to deploy and activate this universal trust registry component. If you plan to do a kind of, let's say, different federate different participants in the data space, then register at the university register the credentials, the participants into this universal registry, deploy and activate this authorization policy store component. Well, include this into the identity management solutions that you already have, or to connect with this authorization policy, either if you embed it into your identity system or just simply well, add a new component and connect this component. Then add well, the policy enforcement point, the policy decision point capabilities in the domain application architecture, configure the ABAC and airbag access policies at the web proxies and PDP. So these are small details of this part of configuring all the authorization and authentication mechanisms. Well, if you need upgrade this authorization logic to the decentralized approach of the identity management, and well, add this logic to the administration console. So these are again small details that you will need to follow in order to put in place all this authorization. And finally, when the authorization and authentication is already, let's say, completed, you can, or you should implement or deploy some mechanism for actually do the data exchange. So you would require probably to define and to agree on certain data models, on certain API, and then to have all the data normalized, or having some translation between the different participants' formats and the agreed format that you decide at the data space level. Of course, this should be done previously to all this. When you establish the governance of the data space, you need to come up with this decision on which could be the models and the exchange API that you plan to use at the data space level. And once all this is in place, you can start to run the data space and to start with the data request and transactions. In the case of the project on the European data space, in the European data space for smart communities, you need to get on board on this federated data space. And for that, what you will have to do is to export or to register your credentials into this universal trust registry at the European level, the European data space level. We can even explore if there could be a possible federation between the registries, the one at the data space level and the one at the European data space level. But this is, well, maybe an area to explore and research, because I'm not sure how this can be done. Then from the data space and the European data space, we need to connect the authorization policies from the data spaces to this European data space, to the registry of the European data space. From the pilot, you need to describe your data and your services in the agreed format and standard at your data space. At the European data space, that will probably be, as we said, the CAD plus some extensions or some additions in order to cover the part of the services. And then you can start in this moment to publish those data and services that you would like to have in this federated catalog. It's not yet, let's say, confirmed if we need to deploy as well at the European level some kind of common vocabulary hub with some data models or ontologies that could be used by all data spaces. It's something to be explored. And the same if we want to expose any data exchange API in order to support the normalization of the data from the different data spaces into a common standard. So we can also favor the cross data space interoperability. So these 5 and 6 steps are still to be explored. But this is more or less the previous one, the steps to be followed to deploy the data space at the pilots level. And these are the steps that are required to connect this data space into the European data space, and also the steps that the European data space or the component that should be put in place at the European level for this federation. So what is next now? So at the level of the pilots, the idea could be now to start to analyze and to select which concrete implementations the pilots should use. Here, we need to come up with a common agreement on the components, which at least they will be compatible with the proposed standards, and explore in all the cases if the use of a connector can facilitate the onboarding and the onboarding of the participants and the extension of the city platforms towards the data space approach. And at the project level, our mission is to again analyze, select, and deploy the new components for the European data space. This should be in alignment with Simple, as we are recommended to follow their components when they were ready. But in the meantime, during the project, our idea is to provide a testbed instance where we can play with certain components and we can deploy these components for the pilots to test the onboarding into the data space. Although we are still looking at the sustainability, of course, of the data space, and we are in conversations with the EDIC Cityverse to see how this may happen in alignment with the European Commission. And we can also explore the use of a common connector for all data spaces, at least to get on board into the European data space. Otherwise, it could be a little bit of more complicated and less interoperable.